Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Jim, for that recorded introduction. Sounded as good as when you recorded it. And for hosting this vital conference today. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been in and out of the Pentagon for 20 years, and this is my first McAleese conference, so I'm pleased to...
We need to talk to you about that.
Yeah. I thought you had to be invited. I was invited, and I'm grateful to be here. For 17 years, you've brought these tremendous patriots together at the right time to confront the most pressing challenges we face, and so I'm pleased to be part of the discussion. It is an honor to be here with you today, so many patriots and leaders of the American defense industrial base. I think I'm motivated by the fact that right now, never before have we seen a gap between the speed of commercial world and the sluggish pace of our government processes, and the consequences of that difference so severe. I believe we're living in a unique and pivotal moment defined by the collision of two monumental forces. The first is the furious pace of our adversaries. While we have debated requirements, they have conducted hundreds of hypersonic weapons tests. While we've published acquisition strategies, they are building a modern naval fleet at a speed not seen since World War II. The starting gun for the 21st century arms race has already fired. Our deliberate, methodical pace is no longer a sign of American strength. It is a strategic vulnerability they are actively exploiting. Our strategies for maintaining overmatch must adapt to this reality, prioritizing speed, innovation, and supply chain resilience as paramount to our national security. The second monumental force is the single greatest explosion of private innovation the world has ever seen. A tidal wave of private capital is creating the future without us. Last year, private corporate investment in AI soared past hundreds of billions, dwarfing our R&D budgets. The very technologies we need are being perfected in commercial labs much faster than our military labs. And here's the stark reality. Our current acquisition system is a fortress built to keep that innovation out. It was designed to manage a handful of defense giants, not to rapidly harness a dynamic, decentralized ecosystem of innovators. The interwoven processes governing how we develop and buy new capabilities are dangerously rigid. The PPBE system locks us into a multi-year cycle, making it difficult to redirect funds to address emergent threats or emerging technology. This, until recently, was compounded by the lengthy Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, JCIDS, requirements process, which risks delivering obsolete systems. Our acquisition apparatus is a slow and linear and risk-averse machine where capability delivery can take over a decade. This collective inertia creates a valley of death where promising technologies fail for lack of timely funding and internal champions. So we find ourselves caught. Our adversaries are moving at lightning speed, while the solutions we need are locked out by our own bureaucracy. We stand at a historic crossroads with a generational opportunity and a moral obligation to dismantle this slow, risk-averse bureaucracy and build an acquisition system that delivers capability at the speed of relevance. We have the most brilliant minds in the world, but we have shackled them to a system designed for a different century. For too long, we have treated time as a free resource, and we were wrong. Time is our most critical, non-recoverable resource. Every day we waste is a strategic advantage handed to our adversaries. They are not playing by our rules. They operate in tight, iterative cycles of design, build, test, and field, deploying new capabilities in the time it takes us to approve a PowerPoint deck for a milestone B. The cost of this delay is not measured in dollars, but in deterrence lost. The most expensive system is the one that shows up the day after the battle is lost. We have institutionalized a culture where the fear of failure outweighs the urgency of the threat. We are outpaced not by a lack of innovation, but by a surplus of caution. But it doesn't have to be this way. We are imagining a different future, an arsenal of freedom built by acquisition agility. What might it look like? First, it's a system of empowered program managers. We select leaders with grit, give them lean teams, budget authority, and top cover to make rapid decisions. We tell them, this is the warfighter's problem. Here are your resources. Go solve it. We trust you. Second, this future is built on a digital-first foundation. Every new program lives in a digital environment. We use digital engineering to test thousands of designs before bending metal. Our systems use open architectures with software as easy to update as a phone app. We must think in 10-day software sprints, not 10-year modernization cycles. Third, we forge a true partnership with industry. We tear down the walls that keep innovative companies away from our biggest challenges. We create rapid, simple contracting pathways for non-traditional firms, turning our industrial base into a dynamic ecosystem. We want the best ideas and the fastest work, not just the lowest bid. Finally, we shift our mindset from writing requirements to defining problems. Instead of a 500-page technical document, we present the warfighter's problem. We need to defeat a swarm of autonomous drones. Then we challenge the brightest minds in our labs, startups, and corporations to compete to solve it. We unleash innovation instead of constraining it. Harnessing this power requires rebuilding the engine of our national strength, our manufacturing base that has since withered. This transformation demands we bring manufacturing home, not just shipyards and tank plants, but microchip fabs, drone factories, and advanced material labs for the next century. And an arsenal is nothing without an artisan. Rebuilding our industrial base means rebuilding our skilled workforce. It means partnering with community colleges and trade schools to forge a new generation of patriotic coders, welders, and data scientists. This is how we turn national security into a national project once again. Our goal is to create a military so agile and advanced that no adversary will dare test our resolve. This is the modern expression of peace through industrial strength, secured by the speed of our innovation. And we began this journey on November 7th with Secretary Hegseth's acquisition transformation strategy. My team immediately began implementing the 38 initiatives that were outlined in the 5 pillars of the acquisition strategy that the Secretary rolled out. And since then, we've already issued 41 class deviations to reform the FAR and DFAR, lowering administrative burdens and accelerating contracting to make it easier for companies, especially small businesses, to work with the department. We are transitioning our program executive officers to portfolio acquisition executives, with 19 already established since November 7th. In fact, 5 additional PAEs were announced by the Navy just yesterday. We are also leveling the playing field for new entrants while stimulating private investment with longer-term contracts and historic deals to expand munitions production. Thanks to the partnership with Congress and their leadership in authorizing multi-year procurements, our industry partners are positioned to invest billions of dollars of their own corporate funds rather than relying on government grants. And the supplier base is now incentivized to optimize their operations and deliver greater value in higher volume, much faster for the warfighter and the taxpayer. We've also announced a $1 billion equity investment in L3 Harris, matched by billions of their own funds, to stimulate growth and meet the rapidly accelerating needs of the munitions industrial base. By funding this expansion through an equity investment instead of a grant, we achieve the growth required at minimal or no expense to the taxpayer. As with any equity investment in a mature and proven company, we are funding growth while enabling the proceeds to return to the Treasury at a future date. Speed, volume, growth at no net cost to the nation. And the defense industry is only as strong as the supply chains that serve as the foundation. That's why President Trump has been focused since day one on reshoring our critical minerals industry. It's not just mining the raw materials. We're looking at the entire value chain across processing and refining to ensure we drive long-lasting resiliency behind this industry. Since President Trump took office, the department has invested $2.3 billion in critical minerals deals, a 273% increase from the previous administration's investments over the course of the previous 4 years. We are also strengthening how we manage foreign military sales through President Trump's America First arms transfer strategy, building a sales catalog to proactively broadcast priorities for sale to our allies and partners. And for small businesses, our Office of Small Business Programs recently launched the Links platform with an AI-informed personalized roadmap to translate service offerings such as navigating government procurement processes and targeted networking into an actionable path for the company's goals. In its first month, Links received 24,000 visits and 2,500 business registrations. All of this change just requires will, and it starts with the defense industry, the government workforce, and the investors in this room. Our reform will not come from a memo. It will be a grassroots movement. We are creating a culture that celebrates intelligent failure. We are seeking prototypes that don't work and tests that fail spectacularly. Why? Because a failed prototype is tuition paid on the path to victory. It's a lesson learned faster and cheaper than if we tried to design perfection into the system from day one. We must test, learn, fail, and learn again faster than anyone on the planet. The job of our acquisition professionals is to be a connector, linking the warfighter's problem to the innovator's solution with the least possible friction. This revolution will happen program by program, decision by decision, and professional by professional. It will be led by the engineer who designs for modularity, the contracting officer who partners with a startup, the program manager who defends their team for taking an intelligent risk. Leaders at every level must become agents of change. CEOs must champion long-term strategic partnerships over short-term profits. Engineers must embrace rapid, iterative development. Government leaders must use every tool to accelerate timelines and reward speed and ingenuity. We must take risk and reward the risk takers. So I invite all to leave today with a renewed commitment to slash timelines, break the bureaucracy, and honor our warfighters with the urgency of our work. The future fights fast, and so must we. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to taking a few of your questions. Thank you. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, my friend. A lot of change. How are you training the workforce to adapt to this new style?
Well, it's a great question. This all started, I won't go so far back as to when I first knew you, but it started in the beginning of the administration, actually shortly after I was confirmed in June. We convened a roundtable of the munitions industrial base, suppliers and primes, and with the goal of achieving speed and volume, and gave them homework. And I said, what is it that we need to do? What could we do differently to help accelerate? And I'm sure many of you in this room were part of that discussion. And we got a lot of helpful feedback. And that kind of formed the foundation of the acquisition strategy that the Secretary rolled out in November. But the other thing it kicked off was very frequent cadence of meetings with industry. And it also kicked off a very frequent cadence of meetings with the programs from myself, Deputy Secretary Feinberg, our leadership team in OSW, the Secretary, the Chairman, the Vice Chairman. And I think what occurred to me through the course of that was the constant pressure and attention that's required to change the culture of the department. It can't all be done from a few leaders, but as we're recognizing the risk takers and we're taking risk ourselves and we're championing those who are taking risks, it will proliferate that sort of mentality. The other thing we're doing when it comes to training is we've transitioned the Defense Acquisition University to the Warfighting Acquisition University, working hard to integrate industry expertise into how WAU is now thinking about training and partnering with our contracting workforce, our program management workforce, because I do think integration with industry is really a theme not only to communicate the needs of the department, but for us to better understand what are the challenges that industry faces that we need to get out of the way of so we can help them move fast, because we can't do it without industry.
Thank you. Just to follow on, could you go through a little bit more detail on the $1 billion equity purchase with L3, just so people understand how you did that and what was the model for that?
Sure. Well, that does draw on a couple of the kind of key initiatives coming out of the acquisition transformation strategy. The first one is direct to supplier. In solid rocket motors is a great use case where L3, as the primary supplier of solid rocket motors to the critical munitions that supply the munitions that on the deals that we recently announced with Raytheon and Lockheed, is common across multiple programs. It's common across multiple vendors. It became inefficient for us to think about having the prime contractors negotiating with a common vendor like that. So number one, that was a great candidate for our director supplier strategy, where the government became a participant in the discussion to negotiate the framework deal that ultimately led to the L3 deal. There's two components to it, and I think it's probably important to start with those munitions deals. So, and then I can come to the L3 if that's all right. So the first is the munitions framework agreements that we announced in January and February, primarily with Lockheed and RTX, were meant to significantly expand the production capacity for those critical munitions like Standard Missile, Tomahawk, Patriot, THAAD, and several others. And what we were able to do in partnership with Congress was establish a multi-year procurement authority that was granted in the FY26 NDAA and the 26 appropriations bill, so that we could enter into a long-term contract that we had discussed with industry and understood what was the duration of the contract that would justify industry being able to make their own investment to expand the production capacity to get to those levels of multiples of production. So that was critical for us to get at the prime level to be able to achieve those agreements and to get industry to invest tens of billions of dollars of their own money. Number one was a significant savings to the taxpayer that we no longer had to have a part of the defense budget. Number two, when they're investing their own dollar, it's just human nature they're going to invest it better than if they were investing our dollar. So I think there were two tremendous positives out of the deals that we cut. But then we needed to look at below the supply chain. So we have this director-supplier strategy, and it's not just L3. We engaged with Honeywell, Boeing on the PAC-3 Seeker, BAE on the THAAD Seeker, and these agreements that we had that gave a 7-year duration and were to flow down to all the suppliers. And so we engaged those key suppliers and in pursuit of their own investment to expand their production capacity to support the flow up to the assembled missile. In the case of L3, we took the unique route of making an equity investment that was matched by billions of dollars of their own funding, because that was such a key component, the solid rocket motor, in addition to the fact that they were at least at the time of the agreement, they were the single qualified supplier to supply those munitions. And so, it's not the first equity investment we made. We've been making several equity investments in these critical mineral companies, but it's an opportunity, I think, to once again get those vendors to provide some skin in the game, and I think incentivize a more productive use of that dollar to expand the overall production capacity.
Thank you. And I have one more before I open it up. And this one, it may be too soon to have seen any results, but about 2 months ago, I lose track of time like I used to, the White House issued a proclamation, I think it was an executive order, on underperforming contractors aimed at certain things like limiting stock buyback, et cetera, et cetera. Have you seen any response from industry on that?
Well, I don't think it's coincidental that the deals were signed since that EO came out. I think that we've had tremendous response from industry, motivated to, and really that's our interest, the President's interest is making sure that we're focused on the positive outcomes of greater investment, greater industry investment, and production capacity so we can achieve the speed and volume that we need in order to meet the needs of the warfighter.
Thank you, my friend. Any questions from the floor?
Yep. Okay. Hang on.
Hey.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Secretary. It's good to see you again. Actually, during your entire talk, I was sitting here waiting to ask the training question, and then saw it get. But there was one other kind of related to that I wanted to ask you. The implementation of the PAEs, as those of us from industry are watching it from outside, seems like the different services are each experimenting with their own approach to that. You see the Air Force is going more granular, the Army PAEs more expansive. I think the Navy, it looks like, is some PAEs are pretty narrow and others are pretty broad. After you get a couple years runtime on this, is the department going to take a look and either try and make it more the same, maybe issue new guidance? Is this something that the department appreciates the experimentation, or is there something that is every service ultimately its own thing in this?
Well, Mark, no surprise, very astute observations on your part in terms of how we're implementing it. And good to see you again. Now, that's the intent, right? It's a little bit of an experimentation. I'm not sure it's worth sort of trying to standardize how the services each do business, and so, but it's actually convenient for us to have alternate ways to implement this direction, see what works. Once we get a few years under our belt, as you had recommended, then, or as you had mentioned, then we can look across and say, what is worth trying to standardize across the services, and what is worth keeping service-specific in terms of implementation. I do think this is, first of all, I want to thank the services for their tremendous partnership and leadership on this. It's actually been a light touch for me. They have really run with this opportunity to transform how these program leadership structures work. There is work to do. I think we're working through, in combination with the requirements reform initiative on the Joint Staff that was really led by the Deputy Secretary, and trying to loosen up how we describe the problem set that we're trying to fix. And then having the programs establish what we're calling the capability trade councils that provide the flexibility to trade requirements in order to prioritize schedule, which maintains our need for speed, but also ensuring that they're engaging with the right stakeholders to make sure they're not trading off an essential requirement. And so kind of figuring out how that process would work effectively. And then I think we're going to need some help from Congress on the other empowerment of the PAE. Well, there's three, I think. The second one is the flexibility to move funding. I think we're still stuck, but we've got I think positive conversations with the appropriators in the hope that we could maybe shake something loose there. And then third is ensuring that we've restructured the teams so that we have our contracting officers and our testers and everybody else that's in the discipline of acquisition that is accountable to the PAE and their leadership team to deliver outcomes. Of course, we respect and want to preserve the standards of those workforces that I think the old structure preserved, but ensuring that we're motivated by this product, by this delivery date, and that we have the team that's incentivized to deliver that, I think will be a key enabler for the success of the PAE. So.
Hi, Mr. Secretary.
We've got hands everywhere.
Mr.
Right.
Secretary.
Wait,
Yes.
It's here, there, and then back to you. And if there's another
All
one over there, we'll
I don't have that much time. I don't-
Everything, everywhere.
I got it.
Mr. Secretary, David Berto, you know more than most that a lot of the ideas that you talked about today are not new. What is new is the focus on actually implementing them and implementing them quickly. When I was in industry, my goal was a signed contract. Only a signed contract counts. But when I'm in the government, only delivered results counts. You've got the agreements in place. Maybe they've turned into contracts. I don't know. When will you actually see delivered results change?
Yeah, well, I think that's good. Thank you for the question, David. First of all, I do think that it is unique. I was at my town hall last summer, and I asked everybody in the room to raise their hand who had been working in the government when acquisition reform had not been an active thing. There weren't a lot of hands up. I was doing it 20 years ago when I was working for Jim Finley and the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology. So, but I do think what's different today, so first thing that's different is we have tremendous momentum at the leadership level. I like to talk about the fact that the one thing, there's agreement on both sides of the river, both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue, both sides of the aisle, is the need for acquisition reform and foreign military sales reform. I just testified this morning on it. So it is a moment of change, and that leadership will, I think, is relevant. I think the second thing is focusing beyond just changing the DOTIs and the policy and putting another guidebook, all of which is important to make sure that we have it aligned with what the best practice is, because our workforce does consult these tools. But actually figuring out how do we change the culture. I think the deals that we rolled out in the first couple months of the year were important because they were demonstrations of forward progress. You're right, we still have to get the final contracts in place. We still have to get funding, but I think we're making great progress in the ability to get the final contracts in place in parallel with pursuing the funding, even in advance of pursuing the funding, because there's a multi-year procurement in place. I think, specifically with respect to these deals, the one caveat that we have to satisfy is the legislation in the appropriations bill said we had to wait 30 days after the FY27 budget was signed. So, but we've had progress up until just being able to put that signature on the document to the point where we're actually, really making some headway. And I think that our industry partners are already making investments. I think that's a result of that frequent cadence with industry that I talked about. Deputy Secretary Feinberg is not shy. He's not shy about giving his opinion about what the contractors need to do, and they're responding to that. And I think the third thing is really focusing on culture change. I mentioned it earlier. How do we think about championing risk takers? How do we think about celebrating them, incentivizing them? How do we think about changing the system so that it's not compliance-oriented, incentive for compliance, but incentive for outcomes and delivery? I think that's going to be a big challenge. And I hope that we can make it a community opportunity to think through what is the best strategy to do that. We're still working that very hard.
Mr. Secretary,
So thank you for your question. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, on your right, Tony Bertucca, Inside Defense, thank you for being with us. I wanted to ask you again about that executive order. So I think some of the concern among reform-minded folks is that now that the frameworks have been announced, that maybe the stick will go away, that maybe there won't be contracts that come out that have got teeth that say contractors have got to have performance metric X in order to get executive compensation Y. Could you provide reassurance to those reformers that it's not just going to go away, and then tell us the status of your review for the watch list, accountability list, the naughty list, if you will, and what you're going to announce in terms of that? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll go back to my earlier comment. Like, we're really just, in terms of the actual contracts, we are constrained by that provision in the legislation that said we had to wait 30 days until after the 27 budget was signed. And it's a reasonable provision. They want to make sure that we're funding these multi-year procurement deals with their help. So and we've been focused. Look, we've got a limited amount of time here. Our focus is on leveraging the momentum that is coming out of that executive order for the purpose of creating deals and investment. And that is where my team is focused. That is where the Deputy Secretary is focused. We believe that's where industry is focused. And the executive order getting the attention that it needs so that we can get some things across the line is, I think, a net positive for the department, for the warfighter, for the taxpayer. I don't think the stick is gone. I think we are really leveraging it, but I think, more than just the EO, it's the partnership, it's the dialogue, it's the trust that's built, I think, that comes from the dialogue with our industry partners, and we're going to just keep charging. Thank you. Other questions?
Secretary Duffey?
Yes.
Hi. So thank you for being here and for applying your leadership to the Merchant Marine Academy and the revitalization there. My son's a plebe there, and I'm just wondering, what are your goals and KPIs as you watch all of these new decisions and programs?
With respect to the acquisition programs or the Merchant Marine Academy?
The Merchant Marine Academy, the revitalization.
So you're confusing me with Secretary Duffey from Transportation. He's got the Merchant Marine Academy. We are both Wisconsinites, but he's got the Merchant Marine Academy project, not me. So. He's hungry for power.
Here we go. New question right here.
Yes.
Hi, Tony Capassi with Bloomberg.
Hey, Tony.
You don't have any green on and you're Irish, by the way.
No, I know. Somebody's already called me out on that. But you're making up for it. So.
I am, and I'm Italian. Okay, I want to key off your software sprints remarks.
Mm-hmm.
The Pentagon DOT&E annual report came out today, and on the F-35, your most expensive program, they said software upgrades for TR2 and 3 have stagnated with no new capabilities introduced in the last year. Are you going to take any action on the F-35 program to right that stagnation situation?
So I think, we certainly recognize that software is a constraint for accelerating modernization on the F-35, and we've been focused with Lockheed on thinking through how do we get some investment to expand their software lab capacity, which I think is probably our main constraint. I mean, software lab capacity and test capacity and all the integration activities that are required run through our ability to complete the software piece of integration, development, et cetera. So I think stagnating is a strong word. I didn't read the DOT&E report yet. I think that they're making progress, but it's always an opportunity for acceleration there.
Good afternoon, sir. John Fuller. We've heard a lot today about everyone embracing the acquisition reform and the services, but still maintain their Title X perspective. So how do we ensure the solutions that services make don't fall into the old trap of being designed, acquired, and sustained as a service capability versus a joint capability? The risk is sustainment will be hindered by not having more common parts, and it might be easier for industry to have contracts for services by vice a joint concern.
Always a challenge. I think, some of the emerging reforms that are coming out of the acquisition transformation strategy that are really kind of led by the research and engineering shop under Emil Michael, I think have really a lot to offer in terms of thinking the joint perspective. The mission engineering and integration activity is really complementary to the requirements reform. And there's already been some great work under the banner of capability portfolio management, where in partnership with research and engineering, acquisition and sustainment, and the joint staff, we look across these capability areas such as like counter C5ISRT and take a look at that kill chain and really drill down and understand what are the discrete tasks that need to occur across that kill chain in order to complete the mission. What capabilities do we have that are mapped against those discrete tasks in terms of actual systems? Where do we have capability or capacity gaps? And so I think right now it's a little laborious, a little mandralic process to get that level of depth. But I think what comes out of that process, and I'm committed to working with Emil to figure out, and the Joint Staff and General Mahoney, to figure out how we can accelerate that process. But a tremendously valuable joint insight into where we have capability needs, and how that can feed the budget process, how it could be an input to industry as an incentive to think through, okay, here's an unresolved problem that we're going to put some money against. And so I think the theory is the services maintain the Title X authority. They have their service unique ways about building capability against these mission threads. But if we've got a robust analytical capability, then we can look across the services, identify those gaps, and then apply the resources and the innovation and the intellectual capital from industry to help us solve those problems.
And Secretary Duffey, with that, we truly appreciate it. I know it took us 17 iterations to get you here. Hopefully it won't
Hopefully
take
not
another
the last.
17,
Yes.
that we can have you back next year.
I have one more question. I'm taking
Jim's gonna kill
moderator
you.
prerogative.
You don't get
Go
another
after me.
question.
Stop
He's
the
the
fighting.
moderator.
Stop the
One
fighting.
question, it's
So,
over.
No directive is ever perfect when published. And I applaud the acquisition transformation. You're 120 days in. Have you started to notice areas where maybe you might want to take a look at either more teeth, less teeth, and kind of give the audience a glimpse into where might we need to do a little refinement?
Yes, thank you for raising that, Al. That's a great thought. There are, I think, 3 areas that come to mind initially. The first one is we didn't specifically talk to, I think it's probably buried under one of the initiatives, which is more generally, but how do we accelerate the qualification certification process? How do we reduce the time and reduce the cost? Because I think that's a major barrier to bringing new entrants into the process. And it's contrary to our speed. Now, I don't know how we strike the balance of the quality assurance that we need and the speed that we need, but we need some dedicated attention on figuring out what that balance is. Secondly, as I've thought about how do the new entrants get into the system better, and that's actually been motivated by some of I didn't talk a lot about the foreign military sales mission that I've undertaken now that Defense Security Cooperation Agency and Defense Technology Security Administration are under my jurisdiction in ANS, but you don't have the new entrants. Once you get the requirements train running and you get the program train running, everybody's got their strict cage that they're in, that they have to do their job. Now, hopefully, the PAE construct broadens that a little bit so that you're not constrained by a strict set of requirements and a strict set of program objectives, but you've got the flexibility to look beyond from a mission context and say, hey, that new entrant has got a new technology that can solve my problem way faster than the serious set of requirements that I inherited that I'm measured upon my performance. And so that's one construct. But the other is, how do we create an internal advocate and champion for those new entrants that don't have all that institutional momentum behind them, if they add value? And I think the NDAA recently introduced the idea of a non-program of record program office, which is intended to kind of create an institutional home for these new entrants, especially when they have interest for foreign military sales from allies and partners, but may not be in the U.S. system yet. So I think that's an interesting tweak on the system to say, how do we help invest in the industrial base, make capability available to our allies and partners that may not be in our system yet. And so I think we still have to tweak that and refine that to figure out if there's also an opportunity to do that to help our new entrants get into the system. And the third one, I lost it. The first two were so good I can't remember the third one. So excellent. All right, thank you all very much. It's a
Well
great
done,
pleasure to
sir.
be here.
Well
Thank
done.
you.